Incest is the sort of theme for House of the Dragon Episode 4, King of the Narrow Sea. This is Matt Smith actually talking in this episode. Episode 3, he didn't say a word and was the standout performance. Episode 4, he comes in guns blazing, politically, connivingly. And I really enjoyed this episode. But yes, incest is the theme. And loads of people are like up in arms by it. They're like, oh my god, incest. Blah. Yeah, like incest gross. It's the kind of point of this. They're not shying away from showing the things that we were told about more so in Game of Thrones. They're just going balls to the wall and showing it. And it makes sense. It's these kind of scenes, not necessarily that this is important, by the way. You don't have to have these kind of elements to a show. But it's these kind of scenes for this show which are important because, again, it's showing what we were told before in Game of Thrones, but it's also these kind of scenes which add that political tension on top of the social intercommentary between everyone as well. And it makes you really actually in the show. It makes you feel for the show a lot more on the characters within them. And also just like, what a great plan by Daemon, Matt Smith's character. So this will be a full spoiler, obviously. We're going to dive into this. I don't show any fancy footage. I'm not keen on that. I just want to talk about the show itself. I have enjoyed every single episode for certain things. And there's one thing undeniably that the show is not, in my view and in my opinion, it is not boring. It's very well shot and very well handled from a cinematography perspective and narratively speaking. There are subtle time jumps which are not just like overlaid at the start of the show 3 years ahead. None of that. Literally none of that at all. There's just subtle time jumps where they go, well, it was but a year since this occurred. And you're like, oh, okay, it's a year. You know, they didn't hang a lantern on last week's episode by showing you that we were 3 years ahead from the previous episode. And they certainly didn't mention anything about the king's health, but you could see that he was missing 2 fingers. And in this episode, you can see even further that the health of the king is declining ever more. And I do wonder whether this was potentially Daemon's plan. So obviously, the last week's episode, he interacted with someone with grayscale, the crab feeder, grabbed the body, and everyone's like, oh, maybe he's going to get grayscale. But I wonder if the King of the Narrow Sea and part of Daemon's plan is that he's going to infect the king with grayscale somehow. Maybe he's infected. Maybe the crown that he came in with and he gave to the king as a gift, maybe that has it on it somehow. I don't know how, but I'm trying to wrap my head around maybe that's a plot element. Who knows? But basically what happens, we open up with Rhaenyra seeing loads of suitors for her hand in marriage to become essentially the future king, I guess. And she cuts the tour 2 months early and goes home. Now this actually affords us a great opportunity to compare House of the Dragon with Game of Thrones with Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. So she goes home on a boat. Now we don't get any huge wide-angle shots of this boat. It's not a real boat, obviously. It's a set piece. They're not obviously on the ocean, clearly. But they don't cut to a wide angle to be like, look at the grandeur of this shot. They work very well within the confines of their own budget, and they go, yeah, we haven't done this. Or the technical ability of the staff on board the show, the set designers, whatever. They haven't done it. They don't cut to a wide angle. Rings of Power, however, they're more than happy to show a wide angle shot of a fully CGI piece of art on screen. And it lacks, completely lacks. So I like that as a good comparison. It was important. And who swoops in as they're sailing back home? Well, of course, it's Daemon on his dragon. They get home in the court. Daemon appears, cut all of his hair off. Weird. Not sure why they decided to do that. I think from a purely aesthetic sort of look, I think the character looked better with the longer hair. Looked more imposing, quite frankly. But never mind. Again, maybe that will become apparent as we go into the series. And he's wearing a crown. He bows before his king and he says, everything is yours that I've got, even my crown, blah, blah, blah. Gives him the crown. And that's why I'm thinking, well, maybe there's something to this grayscale potential theory that he's going to try and infect the king. I don't know. Again, just maybe. From there, Daemon seduces Rhaenyra, taking her to King's Landing, to the inner belly, into a pleasure house. And they sort of make out, and nothing really happens, but it's implied that maybe something was going to, maybe touched her up a little bit like that. I mean, it's incest and it's disgusting. We all know that. But it's how he went around it and how he sort of seduced her into it, basically, by having these discussions, listening to her, and being very, very conniving with it again. And this whole plan is that he's going to seduce her, and he leaves her there, and then the princess is spotted leaving the pleasure house. That then goes to the Hand. The Hand then goes to the king, says what's happened, and then the king confronts Daemon, and Daemon goes, well, if you don't want her sullied, give me her hand. Give me her hand in marriage. And this is where you can see that sort of plan coming together. The plan is, of course, he wants to get to the throne that way. Quite smart, actually, quite intelligent, and it added a lot of tension to the series. And it's just another element of this political sort of Game of Thrones, as it were, coming through. And I really enjoyed that. I really, really enjoyed that. It's those kind of games that are fun, because not only did that happen, but Rhaenyra then spoke to the king. The king is so easily manipulated in this series. Rhaenyra then spoke to the king and was like, well, it's the Hand. The Hand lied to you. And so he then obviously, he then confronts the Hand. And then it's sort of laying this, who's actually right here? Who is actually doing what? Was it the Hand conspiring? Or maybe he's not full-blown conspiring, because, of course, Rhaenyra did go to the pleasure house with Daemon, but was part of the Hand's greater plan a conspiracy as well to have his blood on the throne. Maybe. But it's these kind of elements that I think that this series really excels at. And I genuinely can't wait to see what happens moving forwards. Rhaenyra also slept with her knight that protects her. That was kind of a given that was going to happen. And I think that opens itself up very interestingly to things moving forwards. Very, very interestingly, actually. And then as well, the other things which I'm quite excited about is just seeing what happens moving forwards with the Valerians, because Rhaenyra has been promised to Corlys's son. So, interesting times ahead. Really enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you thought of it. I'd love to hear. So let me know your thoughts down below. If you're new here, do hit subscribe. Review this series once a week, of course, as well as Rings of Power on Fridays and She-Hulk on Thursdays. Cheers, ladies and gents. Take care.